Joanna, 30 years old, and I've been married to Nathan for almost 2 years. He's a kind, calm man and my safe haven in a noisy world. We live in Raleigh, North Carolina in a cozy little house we renovated together down to the tiniest detail. We both have stable jobs, are financially independent, and life seemed too peaceful to worry about anything. But there was one thing I was never mentally prepared to face: my mother-in-law, Lorraine. From the first day I met her, I knew this relationship wouldn't be easy. Nathan had warned me, my mom is a bit particular, but don't mind it, she just needs time. I tried to believe that, told myself to give her a chance. But the way she looked at me during that first meeting, that gaze like I was an unfinished draft, a choice her son shouldn't have made, spoke louder than any introduction. That first dinner at her house, I walked into a kitchen where everything was so polished and perfectly arranged it felt suffocating. Lorraine was setting food on the table, turned to me and gave a faint smile. "Hello, Joanna, we finally meet," she said, her voice soft but with an undertone that made my skin crawl. I smiled back, trying to be polite. Nathan stood next to me, his hand giving mine a reassuring squeeze. That dinner felt like a discreet job interview I hadn't signed up for. I had just picked up my knife to cut into the roast when Lorraine began. "Remember, Nathan, Amelia used to cook this dish so well your father asked for thirds." Nathan gave a small nod and a tight smile, but I saw his lips press together. That name, Amelia, was clearly not a stranger, and it was obvious I was being compared to her. I set the knife down, still smiling. "Sounds like she was a great cook," I said, pretending not to be affected. Lorraine stared at me for a moment, then replied, "Oh, she was many things." The words floated like a breeze but landed like a stone. After dinner, I asked Nathan, "Who is she, an ex?" He sighed and pulled me onto the couch. "Amelia was my ex-girlfriend. We broke up nearly 4 years ago. My mom used to adore her. A lot." I didn't ask more. I didn't need to. I understood what I was up against. From that day on, I knew I wasn't just becoming a daughter-in-law. I was stepping into an invisible contest I never signed up for. Lorraine didn't need to say it outright. The way she emphasized Amelia's achievements, brought up those perfect dinners, those holidays back then. It was all subtle leverage, nudging me back step by step in her eyes. I'm not someone who backs down easily. But there's one thing I never considered. Constant comparison doesn't just wear you down, it begins to chip away at sacred things in your marriage, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could handle that. I never thought the person straining my marriage would be someone I couldn't just walk away from, but it was the truth, and this was just the beginning. I had food allergies since I was 12, and my life since then has been a series of label checks, avoiding unfamiliar dishes and constantly explaining why I couldn't eat the delicious things others offered. Peanuts are my worst enemy, followed by soy, kiwi, potatoes, and certain beans. Even a tiny amount could send my body into a severe reaction and land me in the hospital. Nathan knew about it from our earliest dates. He was always thoughtful, always asked before we ate anywhere, even memorized the list of things I couldn't touch. I used to think, if there was anyone who made me feel safe with food, it was him, and I naively believed that when I married him, his family would respect that. I was wrong. The first dinner at my mother-in-law's house after the wedding, Lorraine laid out a table that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "Joanna, today I made my special papaya salad. Hope it suits your taste," she said with a smile, putting some on my plate. I paused and gently asked, "Can I ask what's in the dressing?" "Oh, it's just sesame dressing with a bit of crushed peanuts, but just a little. Should be fine." I set my chopsticks down. I looked at Nathan, and he immediately placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice calm. "Mom, I told you, Joanna can't have peanuts. It's not about a little or a lot. Any amount is dangerous." Lorraine sighed and put her bowl down. "Oh, goodness, I'm old. My memory isn't what it used to be. But you know, Amelia used to love this dish." There it was again. Even though I had never met Amelia, it felt like she was always sitting beside me, nodding in approval whenever Lorraine made a comparison. But what truly chilled me wasn't the name. It was how my mother-in-law deliberately ignored my condition. There was no way she could have forgotten. Just a few weeks earlier, I gave her a detailed allergy list, even emailed it. Nathan printed it out and taped it to her fridge. The second incident happened during a birthday party for Nathan's cousin in Charleston. Lorraine introduced the dessert, homemade almond cookies. I was about to decline when she said cheerfully, "Don't worry, Joanna, I didn't use almond flour. Swapped it for oat flour, much safer." I took a small bite, just a nibble, but within minutes my throat started to itch. I rushed out to the balcony, trying to stay calm. Nathan followed, his face pale when he saw me gripping the railing, my breath getting shallow. We left the party early and I spent the evening in the ER. When I came to, Nathan was by my bedside, eyes red. He held my hand, his voice rough. "I'm sorry. I should have tasted it first." I shook my head, exhausted. "It's not your fault." "But Nathan, do you really think your mom forgot?" That time, he didn't answer, and that silence was the clearest answer I'd ever gotten. Since then, I've brought my own food whenever we visit Lorraine. I even started limiting visits. But Lorraine didn't stop. Another time she video called me holding a cookbook. "Joanna, I'm learning how to bake gluten-free, peanut-free cookies for Christmas. You see, I'm trying, right?" I gave a tight smile. "Yes, it's good that you're trying." But when Christmas came, I still found peanut sesame dressing in the salad. When I declined to eat it, she laughed. "Oh, I forgot. But it's just a little." And that was when I realized maybe she didn't forget. Maybe she was testing me. Testing whether I was as fragile as she thought. The last time, I didn't give her the chance. I called before the Thanksgiving gathering. "Mom, I'll bring my own food. I'm not risking it again." Lorraine laughed through the phone. "Joanna, you're overreacting. I meant well." I replied calmly, "I know you always mean well, but my safety is not a game." When I hung up, my heart was racing, but for the first time I felt in control. I wasn't letting her dictate how I felt anymore. But I could also feel the real storm was still ahead. And next time, I knew Lorraine wouldn't back down easily. After the Thanksgiving incident, Nathan started seeming more thoughtful than usual. He still took care of me, still asked about my meals, my fatigue, but his eyes, sometimes they looked distant, like he was weighing something heavy in his heart. I began to notice that every time we came back from his mom's house, he'd get quiet. He'd sit silently, staring out the window, spinning his wedding ring like a nervous habit. I didn't ask right away. I wanted to give him space. But one evening, while folding laundry in the bedroom, I heard him talking to someone in the living room. His voice was low and serious. I walked out, about to ask if he wanted tea, when I heard him say, "Mom, Joanna is trying her best. You can't keep doing this." I froze at the doorway. My whole body went still. A pause, then Nathan added tiredly, I know she has a lot of limits, but that doesn't mean she can't be a mom." I walked back into the room, heart pounding. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clenched. Not out of anger, but out of fear, that the thing I'd long suspected was starting to take shape. Lorraine didn't just want to control the kitchen. She wanted to control our future. That night, after hanging up the phone, Nathan walked into the room. He looked at me, knowing full well I had heard everything. He sat down beside me, resting his hand gently on my thigh. "Mom just called. She brought up the topic of kids again." I stayed silent for a moment. "And what did you say?" "I told her we're planning, but everything takes time, that no one has the right to interfere in our decisions as a couple." I looked at him, searching. "Do you believe that?" Nathan hesitated. That moment was what made my throat tighten. Sometimes I just worry," he admitted. "You have so many restrictions. You're at the doctor's so often. If you ever get pregnant, I'm afraid it could put you in danger." I took a deep breath. "Nathan, I won't deny I have limitations, but I'm not helpless. I've never let my conditions stop me from doing what I want. And I want to be a mother. Not to prove anything, but because I'm ready. But I can't fight for this if you start doubting me." He took my hand. "I'm not doubting you. I'm just torn. Every time Mom calls, she puts these images in my head I don't want to believe. That if something ever happened to you, I'd regret it for the rest of my life." I gently pulled my hand away. "Nathan, the real danger isn't my allergies. It's your mother's words." The next morning, as I was leaving for work, I saw a small envelope slipped under the door. The handwriting was neat, familiar. It was from Lorraine. I opened it. "Joanna, I only want what's best for Nathan. You can be angry with me, but don't let pride push my son into unnecessary risks. Motherhood is a responsibility. Not everyone is fit to take it on. Please understand, love isn't always enough. Lorraine. I read it again and again, each word like a tiny paper cut. No blood, but it stung. I didn't show it to Nathan. I tucked it into the vanity drawer, among things I rarely touched. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew, if Nathan saw it, the crack between him and his mother would never be repairable. I thought I was strong. I thought that if I stood my ground, Lorraine couldn't shake me, but I underestimated her patience and her quiet control. Lorraine didn't need to yell to hurt someone. She just had to plant a seed of doubt and let it grow in the hearts of those she targeted. And what terrified me most was that the seed had started to take root in Nathan. We still loved each other. But between the morning kisses and the goodnight wishes, there was a silence growing larger each day. I could feel it. And I knew if we didn't do something, that silence would turn into a canyon, one we might not be able to climb out of. I found out I was pregnant one morning in late April when soft sunlight slipped through the curtains and Nathan was still asleep beside me. I stared at the 2 red lines on the test, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, not from fear but from joy. After all the doubts, the long conversations, and the seemingly endless silences, we had finally turned a page. A chapter I never thought I'd be lucky enough to reach. Nathan was speechless for a moment when I told him, then pulled me into a silent, tight embrace. That feeling, that embrace, washed away all the doubts, if only for a moment. I hadn't planned to tell my in-laws so soon, but Lorraine always had a way of steering things her way. She found out through an offhand comment from Nathan's sister and immediately called me, her voice unusually enthusiastic. "Joanna, I'm thrilled. This news deserves a proper celebration. You know how our family values these special moments." I hesitated. "Mom, I don't think it's really necessary." No, she interrupted. "You're carrying a Fairbanks child. This is a source of pride for our entire lineage. I'll take care of everything. You just need to show up and enjoy." And just like always, I had no choice. The party was held at Nathan's grandparents' estate in the suburbs of Asheville. When we arrived, the whole house was decorated lavishly with white flowers, gold ribbons, and buffet tables filled with colorful dishes. The guest list was bigger than I'd expected. Extended relatives, old friends of Nathan's, and of course Lorraine, standing at the center like the host of a grand performance. She walked up and hugged me like we were best friends. "Hello, dear daughter-in-law," she said, beaming, though her eyes were oddly cold. "You look radiant. Perhaps the baby's already making you stronger?" I gave a small nod. Inside, that familiar sense of wariness rose like a reflex. "I chose the food carefully today," Lorraine said as she led me to the buffet. "I remember you have many allergies, so I did my best to avoid them. But if there's something you're unsure about, just ask me." That last line slipped out like a breeze, but it sent chills down my spine. I scanned the spread: salads with mystery dressings, shiny crusted quiche, a tray of cookies labeled gluten-free with no ingredients listed. Nathan held my hand tightly, as if he sensed something wasn't right too. "Can we just stick to fruit and plain rice?" I whispered. He nodded, his brow furrowed. Glasses were raised, laughter filled the elegant space, but I couldn't relax. Every dish felt like a trap dressed in pretty garnishes. As I reached for a slice of barley bread, Lorraine gently placed her hand on my wrist. "You might want to skip that, Joanna. I'm not sure if the chef used nut butter." I froze, not because of the warning but because of its precision. How did she know so specifically? And if she knew, why was the dish even on the table? "Thank you for the heads up," I smiled, though my voice trembled. Throughout the party, I couldn't eat anything but a glass of water. Every time Lorraine approached, my throat tightened. Nathan noticed the tension too, but in front of everyone, we kept up appearances, 2 leads in a carefully staged play. At the end of the party, Lorraine raised a toast again. "Joanna, I'm so happy you've joined our family, and now we'll bring in a new generation. We're all hoping for a healthy, intelligent child, one that's not too sensitive." Polite laughter rippled around the room. I was frozen. Nathan turned to look at me, but this time, his eyes weren't just concerned, they were burning with restrained anger. And I knew, this party wasn't a celebration. It was a cruel reminder that in Lorraine's eyes I was still a wrong choice, a risk she'd never accept. But she was wrong. This child wasn't a symbol of any bloodline, it was my hope. My reason not to back down, no matter how sugar-coated the traps on that table were. The party seemed to be over when guests began saying goodbye, but for Lorraine it never ended with just food and pleasantries. There was always a grand finale, a moment she crafted to test me, or more precisely to break me, and I sensed it coming the moment she said, "Joanna, I made a special dessert just for you." The open kitchen fell silent as Lorraine wheeled out a cart with an elaborate mousse cake, its glossy layers glowing under the chandelier. "This is made from Amelia's old recipe," she said with a sweet smile, "but I tweaked it a little to suit your taste." I wasn't sure what stunned me more, hearing Amelia's name again on what was supposed to be my celebration, or how perfect the cake looked. Suspiciously perfect. Nathan stood beside me, his body tense, eyes darting from the cake to his mother, then back to me. "What's in it, Mom?" he asked, trying to keep calm. Lorraine laughed. "Oh goodness, do you two really doubt me that much? No peanuts, no soy, no potatoes or anything scary. Just chocolate mousse, almond milk, and a touch of macadamia extract for flavor." I triple-checked. I stood frozen. "Almond milk?" I repeated, my voice low but clear in the suddenly quiet room. "Yes, but it's organic." She waved it off like that erased the serious risk it posed to me. Nathan stepped forward immediately, gently placing a hand in front of me. "Mom, Joanna can't have anything made with almonds. You know that." Lorraine shrugged. "Sometimes. A little exposure builds resistance. I read that somewhere. We shouldn't be so afraid." I couldn't believe my ears. She'd really just said that like my health was some science experiment. But before I could respond, something no one expected happened. Mark, Nathan's father, who had been silent in the corner, stepped forward with an expression I'd never seen on him. Without saying a word, he reached out and swiftly knocked the mousse plate from Lorraine's hand. It crashed to the floor, shattering, mousse and cream splattered like evidence laid bare. The room held its breath. "Mark, what are you doing?" Lorraine snapped, her face paling. He didn't answer her. Instead, he turned to Nathan and me, voice firm. "I saw the ingredients list in the kitchen. Lorraine didn't just use almond milk, she added peanut oil too. It was clearly written on the shopping list." I felt the ground slip from under me. Nathan stiffened, turning to his mother. "Mom?" Just one word, but it carried everything. Lorraine opened her mouth, ready to speak, then paused. Her face flickered with confusion, then quickly shifted to defense. I thought in small amounts it'd be fine. Joanna needs to learn to adapt." The room exploded in cold silence. "No," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I don't need to adapt to anything. I'm not a test subject. I'm your daughter-in-law, and I'm carrying your grandchild." Nathan stood still beside me, but his hand tightened around mine. Then he turned to his mother. This time there was no softness in his eyes. "I can't believe you did this. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was intentional." Lorraine stepped back, her face drained of color. But Mark remained where he was, his eyes locked on his wife, filled with unmistakable disappointment. "I've been silent long enough," he said, "but today you crossed a line." There was a murmur among the guests. Someone picked up a shard of the broken plate, someone else looked down, avoiding eye contact, and I just stood there, one hand instinctively resting on my belly. That was the moment I understood this wasn't just between me and Lorraine anymore. This was a turning point, and from that moment on I knew nothing could go back to the way it was. The air in the room froze after Mark's firm declaration. Soft background music still played from the ceiling speakers, in stark contrast to the stifling silence among the guests. Curious, confused, and stunned eyes all turned to Lorraine, who could no longer maintain her usual composure. She backed into the table slightly as if to steady herself. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "I didn't put peanut oil in anything. Anyone could have written that list, maybe the chef or someone else in the house." Mark pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and placed it firmly on the table. "I found this in the drawer beneath the microwave. Whose handwriting is this?" Nathan stepped forward, glanced at it and frowned. "That's your handwriting, Mom, no doubt about it." Lorraine snatched the paper, but not quickly enough. Everyone had already seen the neat line. Peanut oil. Not Joanna's usual brand, but more fragrant. The words hit like a punch of truth. I didn't say anything. My throat burned. Not from fear, but from the confirmation of every suspicion I had carried, now laid bare in front of dozens of Nathan's family members. Joanna, Lorraine began, but her voice had lost its usual steadiness. I just thought you were being overly sensitive. You can't live in fear forever. I did it, to help you be stronger. Nathan turned, his gaze turning to stone. You're saying you nearly endangered my wife and child to help her be stronger? Lorraine fell silent. A sigh came from Nathan's aunt, followed by whispers from a few others. I didn't need to look. I knew the wall Lorraine had built for years was now visibly cracking in front of everyone. In truth, her voice rose, shaky and defensive. From the beginning, I didn't think she was the right one. Joanna is too delicate, always needs care. I hoped you would choose someone else. Someone like Amelia. Someone who could support you without being a burden. No one said a word. Everyone stood still as if they couldn't believe what they'd just heard. I looked at Lorraine, the woman I had endured for 2 years, who had once hugged me in front of relatives, who once said she would treat me like a daughter. And I didn't feel anger, just a hollow emptiness sinking into my chest. So you never really accepted me, I said slowly, clearly. Not even when I'm carrying your grandchild. Lorraine said nothing. She just stood there, pale, as if the truth she never expected to be exposed had come crashing down in the harshest way possible. Mark shook his head, bitterness in his eyes. I've stayed silent too long, letting you manipulate whoever you wanted, but today, you crossed a line I can't ignore. I won't stand by while you turn someone's life into a lesson. Chairs shifted, a few people quietly rose and left the room. The ones who remained looked down, uncomfortable, exchanging uneasy glances. Nathan stepped beside me, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. Let's go, he said, his voice low but resolute. I nodded, but before leaving, I looked at Lorraine one last time. I once wanted a family. I once wanted to call you Mom. But today you lost that chance. Forever. We walked out of that house in silence, leaving behind a room full of warm lights but colder than ever. On the way home, I didn't cry. Nathan didn't say a word either, but when he pulled into our driveway, he turned to me, eyes glassy. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I should have seen it sooner. You've never been a burden. You're the reason I want to be a better man every day. I took his hand, squeezing it gently. We have each other, and I believe that's stronger than any cruel word ever spoken. Outside, the soft spring rain began to fall. Everything felt washed clean, and I knew the next chapter of our lives was ready to begin. No more pretending. No more space for those who see kindness as weakness. Only truth and love, the one thing Lorraine could never control. A week after the party, our home still lingered in a quiet that felt like the echo of a storm. No more phone calls from my mother-in-law every evening. No more surprise video chats just to check in. Everything had gone eerily quiet, like someone had flipped a switch, disconnecting two worlds. And for the first time, we could breathe without flinching or bracing ourselves. On Sunday morning, Nathan made me a cup of warm tea just like always. He set it on the table in front of me, then sat across with a thoughtful look in his eyes. I watched him, waiting for him to speak. Dad moved out, he said, his tone so calm it caught me off guard. I blinked. You mean, Mark? Nathan nodded. He said he couldn't keep living in a lie. After the party, he packed up and moved into his old apartment up north in Charlotte. He said it was a decision he should have made years ago. I sat still, a mix of sadness and understanding washing over me. Mark had always been the quiet observer, soft-spoken but wise. Maybe he'd endured Lorraine for too long, and the scene at the party had finally been the breaking point. And her? I asked, though I already sensed the answer. Nathan sighed. Alone. Shunned by most of the family. Aunt Emmy even told her she wouldn't let her kids near Lorraine unless she agreed to see a therapist. Everyone was shocked. No one could believe she'd do what she did. To you, and to the baby. I didn't feel joy or vindication. What I felt was relief. Like the mask had finally been removed and the truth laid bare. No apologies needed, no one had to lose. Just the peace of living in truth was enough. In the days that followed, Nathan and I began preparing the small upstairs room. the one we'd kept empty since we moved in. Now it would be our baby's room. I picked out mint green wallpaper. Nathan patiently installed each wooden shelf. He even repainted a rocking chair he found in a thrift shop in the next town. We didn't say much about the past. We didn't need to. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. A space we used to heal. One afternoon in early June, while I was folding a light blanket in the nursery, Nathan walked in holding a white envelope. "A letter," he said, "from Mom." I looked at him, then at the envelope. I didn't touch it. "You open it." Nathan sat beside me, tearing it open slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter about a page long. I watched his face as he read, trying to read his thoughts. At the end he simply folded it back up, placed it on the table and said, "She apologized, but it's her kind of apology. No admission of guilt, just that she didn't expect things to go this far. She hopes to see us before the baby is born." I stayed quiet, one hand resting on my now visibly round belly. The baby kicked softly and I smiled instinctively. "Do you want to see her?" I asked. Not accusing, not leading. Nathan shook his head. "Not right now. I think we need time to protect what matters most." I nodded. Our little family. We didn't reply to the letter. But we didn't tear it up either. Nathan put it back in the envelope and tucked it away in a drawer we rarely opened. The next week I had my third ultrasound. The image on the screen brought tears to my eyes. A tiny, steady heartbeat, like a whisper of hope after the storms we had weathered. Nathan held my hand. His eyes read too. "Joanna," he said, voice thick with emotion. "We've been through so much, and from now on I swear, I won't let anyone come between us or hurt this family again." I smiled, gripping his hand tighter. "I believe you. I believe in us." And I truly did. Lorraine, with everything she had done, was now just a part of my memory, unerasable but no longer in control of my life. To me, family wasn't about blood or titles. It was about the people who stood by you when the storm hit. And I had found that in Nathan, in the little one growing inside me, and in a strength I never knew I had. We didn't look back, we didn't need to. The future was calling, and this time I was stepping into it as a mother, not for acceptance, but for protection. July passed in golden sunlight across our rooftop, and I counted each week of pregnancy like moments of a new life taking shape. Nathan was busy with work but never let me feel alone. At night he'd sit beside me, his hand resting on my belly, listening patiently to the tiny heartbeat. Though neither of us said it, we both knew. The journey we were on wasn't just about becoming parents. It was about growing beyond the pain and trials our families had once caused. My story with Lorraine was no longer private. During a routine checkup, my OBGYN Dr. Sharon gently asked about my allergy history. I shared parts of what had happened. She paused her notes, looked at me and said, "Joanna, you're not just protecting yourself. You're showing others that allergies aren't trivial. Ignoring them can have very serious consequences." That comment stayed with me. Maybe if this had only been typical tension between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, I would have stayed quiet for the sake of peace. But things had gone too far. It could have ended in tragedy. If Mark hadn't stepped in. And the scariest part was, not everyone gets that moment of intervention like I did. This wasn't about forgetfulness or ignorance. It was about deliberately crossing boundaries. The belief that love or protection comes with control. And in Lorraine's case, it was control, disguised as looking out for her son's future. But real love doesn't demand one-sided sacrifice. It doesn't live on manipulation or dismissal. I learned that through the man sitting beside me every night, Nathan, who once struggled, torn between mother and wife, but who ultimately chose what was right. Not because I'm his wife, but because he understood. To love someone means respecting their limits and protecting them, even from a single drop of peanut oil. This story isn't just about a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law who didn't get along. It's a warning about underestimating medical conditions just because they seem harmless. Allergies aren't a joke. A rash, a scratchy throat, or a tight chest can be the thin line between life and danger. And it's even scarier when someone crosses that line. On purpose. I remember Lorraine's eyes that day at the party, not full of hate, but pride masking helplessness. In her world, someone like me, a girl with a long list of don'ts, didn't fit her picture of the ideal mother for her son. But what she didn't understand was that being a mother doesn't require perfection. It requires love, protection, and the strength to say no to what can hurt your child. Even the tiniest thing. And I know I did the right thing. Not because I won, but because I held on to myself. I didn't let silence erase the voice that needed to be heard. I didn't let endurance become an excuse for unacceptable behavior. Nathan changed too. He no longer flinched when someone mentioned his mother. He spoke openly, defended our boundaries, and each time he did, I saw a man who had stepped out of the shadow of being the good son to become a true husband, a real father. Someone ready to do whatever it took to protect his home. We don't know what the future holds. Maybe Lorraine will try to come back, write more letters of apology. Maybe she won't change at all. But that's no longer what matters, because now we've learned to build our family our own way. With honesty, with trust, and most of all, with unconditional love. And when I place my hand on my belly, feeling the tiny life growing inside, I know everything I've endured, chosen and stood for, it's all for them. I'm Joanna, and this is the story I lived. Not perfect, but real. A story that reminds us love doesn't need to be loud, only strong enough to stand up for what's right. And if you're somewhere out there feeling compared, doubted, or pushed past your limits, remember, you are not weak. You're just learning to be strong, in the way you were always meant to be. From my own story, I've learned that real love isn't just sweet words. It's walking beside someone through the hardest times. Family isn't where you must sacrifice yourself to be accepted. It's where you're safe to be yourself. Ignoring a medical condition, no matter how small, can have unimaginable consequences. I've learned to stand up, not to fight someone, but to protect what's worth it. Love, respect, and the child I carry inside me. What do you think about Joanna's story and the storm she went through? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more touching and authentic family stories.